In this new video lesson about ENSCAPE for Rhino, we're gonna start to create our layers, our materials in Rhino, and also we can use them in ENSCAPE, of course. So this was the previous lesson file, which we got from the samples from the official website. And with this, we can start to learn how things are distributed and organized in a really, neat distribution here in the layer. So we can see that we have some like bigger layers here for the building and the interiors, and then inside the building. So we can turn this on and off, and we can visualize only part of the scene. And this also um, matters in terms of rendering, because if you render here in ENSCAPE less things that are inside, this is going to be quicker. And as you can see here, the people not actually part of Rhino. These were not like imported in Rhino, which is something you can do. And also let me synchronize the view again. Okay, so these are called proxies. So they are visualized like this. They are like much lighter and simplified version of the actual model that we visualize in ENSCAPE. And this is good because it's not going to be heavy when it renders. So these are assets that you can get from ENSCAPE libraries, but we're also going to see how we can import um, objects and people and props and other stuff from other websites because, well, if you want more, of course, than what ENSCAPE has to offer. But one interesting thing, again, is how everything is well defined in this file. So you can see in the building, we have the walls. So everything is distributed perfectly. Then we have the columns, and then we have the slats and the window glass. And everything has, every layer has a color. And you can change the color in Rhino just by clicking here and select another one. Now this is the visualization color, so how you visualize it in Rhino, so it is not affecting the visualization of the material in ENSCAPE. So this is just, for you to handle better complex projects like this in Rhino. And then next to that, you have the material, which is not used in here. And so all the materials that we see in this sample file, they come from ENSCAPE. They don't come from Rhino. And then we have ceiling, and then we have interiors. So we have exterior or structural parts, and then we have interiors. So this is like partially hidden and partially visible. And again, we can, if we have this situation here, we can turn on all the interiors, and then we can decide which one we want to turn off. Just give it a second, and you will visualize them in ENSCAPE as well. And then we have layers for light. So basically you need to distribute the many objects in your scene in a logic way so that when you don't need something, you can turn it off. And also the distribution here of layers is useful for handling the materials, to manage the materials. And I'm gonna do some examples in just a second. Okay, so also we can change visualization style in ENSCAPE, but we don't have wireframe. Wireframe is really interesting, and it's basically a part of the scene. So you can, if you go in a wireframe mode in Rhino, you can see how objects are generated and which are the heaviest objects. And you can see also these trees, they don't look so heavy here because these are, again, proxies. So these are not, we cannot see the actual leaves or anything. This is just a representation that make the object light and not heavy than when it comes to the rendering part. Okay, so as I said, we don't have something like a wireframe in ENSCAPE, but also change here the position of the sun holding shift and the right mouse, which is part of the visualization. So up here, we have some really few buttons actually. So this one here changes the camera, but we're gonna talk about that later. And this one here, the little engine icon, we have visual settings. So in here, we can change. So right now we are not applying any style, but for example, if you want to see only with one material, kind of a model, an architectural model instead of something realistic, we can use this white or polystyrol also, which makes everything kind of looking like plastic. Now polystyrol is like translucent, so we can change here the transmission. And also we have outlines, which is not really a wireframe, but kind of closer. So it's kind of a technical outline that show us the objects. But again, if I go closer to the um, the people here, you can see that I cannot see the wireframe. I can just see, the details, and I can tell that's a pretty complex model when it's totally rendered. And then you can go white, or you can also use this outline in standard mode if you put here none. So it's gonna add that outline. It's gonna look a little bit more cartoonish, but it's gonna like enhance the silhouettes and the shapes of the various elements in your scene. Now we're gonna come back here later. Just want to show you that something you can do in Rhino and something that you can do in ENSCAPE. So sometimes there are things you can do in Rhino only, and sometimes only in ENSCAPE. And now I'm gonna change the project. I'm gonna use lesson 10 of my design and architecture project course, video course here. So you can see that nothing is happening right now in ENSCAPE. So we just need to close and start ENSCAPE all over again. So I'm gonna press here and just wait for this other scene to be loaded. And here I already worked a little bit with, you can see not only layers, so I distributed things into the layers, but also I've applied some materials that come from Rhino itself. And this is some of the results. So in using just Rhino without working with materials in ENSCAPE, we can apply materials that look like kind of a glossy plastic or rough plastic or metal, rough metal, shiny metal. And we can also use like really standard colors. For example, for this terrain, I put a simple green color, which I think at the beginning is good because it will help you again to distribute things in your general model and to visualize better the various layers. So before you start to apply realistic materials like with texture and everything, this is my suggestion. Just go for simple colors, simple materials. And these are found already in Rhino, like simple glass, simple metal, simple plastic, to have, again, kind of a architectural small scale model of your scene. Okay, so let's work with this one, which right now is white, and I'm gonna apply some stuff. Also, this is, you can see kind of an exploded um, version of the window because this is part again of the lesson, and it was meant to show how you can create like framing and panels from an opening that you carved out of your 3D model. And try to avoid like problems like this little, you see, things like this, because they will appear in the render and they will not look too good. You can always fix them, but try to work clean in Rhino like this. And this is also like a glass panel without the framing. So usually if you put the framing, it's gonna look more realistic than if you don't put any framing. So first of all, we have two options when working with materials in Rhino. The first option is to go object by object. So for example, if I select this object and I want to change the default material, I will go to the properties. And here you can see if you have already a layer assigned to this object. And yeah, we already have a layer assigned, which is called walls. And if I go and look for this layer, walls, you can see there is already a material applied. So right now, this object is using the material settings for the, the layer settings for the material. So if I want to change that, here in the not in the properties, but in the next tab, which is the material, you can see that I can change here. Instead of doing use layer material, I will click here and I can either choose one of the existing materials that I have imported or used before in the scene, or that are already available. And these pink ones, they probably are missing something, some texture, so this is why they look like this. So you don't want to use them, or you need to fix them before. Or we can just create a new material. So if I click and create new, I have a bunch of options that again are available in Rhino. So choose existing again is going to tell me if I want to use something that is already in the scene. And oops, just deselect it. So let me go back and select. Okay. Or I can create one of these. So if we go to the standard one, so glass will actually create something like a glass, and this is something I've done here with for the windows. And then you can choose a color if you want like a tinted glass, and then you have clarity, which makes it like more or less glossy or like reflecting. And then you have IOR, which is the index of refraction. And then we have other possibilities. So gem, which is similar to glass. Now emission also is pretty interesting. It's going to turn the object into a light. And this works also in ENSCAPE. We just need to go in a night scene. So if I hold the shift key and the right click and I change the time of the day, you can see that if I go in a night scene, this will become a light, essentially, an emissive object. And that's really cool. And also it's available directly in Rhino without even going into the ENSCAPE materials, which we'll see later. And then we have metal. So metal, you can see it creates this effect. Let's change the color. Let's make something like gold. Okay, and then you have the roughness. So more rough or more polished. And you can't really tell the difference of this. According to this visualization. So some of the materials effects, they work better in ENSCAPE, and we're gonna see later, but you can try. And also you can use textures like this bomb texture if are available. And well, these are procedural texture, I guess, because they don't show. So metal is not really like looking too optimized in let's go like with a really big effect, if we can see. No. So the metal, well, looks fine, but there are better things you can do in here in the materials. Now, before we continue with other types of material, I want to show you the other way. So the other way is to work directly with a layer. So let's assume that I want to create another layer for this base. So first of all, I need to create the material, the layer, so new layer, and then I need to create the material. So let's call this like base building 3. Okay, and I can change the color already. So let's make this like yellow, but I don't see anything until that object gets into this layer. So I need to select that object in Rhino, go to the layer, and then change object layer. So now you can visualize the yellow only in Rhino, because this is a visualization setting of the layer in Rhino. You cannot see it in here in ENSCAPE. To see it in ENSCAPE, or actually you can also run a render here using the rendered visual style in Rhino. And to see it in the rendered or in ENSCAPE, you need to apply a material. So again, we have a similar selection menu. So I can select existing material from here, or I can just change the color, because the default material is plaster. So if I change the color of this plaster, that will be appearing. So if I say okay, I need to first confirm. Okay, now you can see it's appearing also in ENSCAPE. And Plaster is the base material, and it's white. And you can change with the color picker, but that's really all you can do here with Plaster. So it's not really interesting, I can say. But it's also pretty lightweight, pretty easy to use. Here you can change the name, so we can call this base building tree, okay. And here we can change the type. So again, is it going to be an emission, a glass, a gem, a metal? Let's go for paint. Now paint is a bit more interesting because we have a color, but we can also change the glossiness. So we can make it more glossy. Let's say okay, so we can see the difference. We can see the reflections down there. Or we can make it less glossy, like more opaque, more rough. So that's a better, well, you have more options than simple plaster. And then we have physically based, which also has roughness. And we can see a little bit more here in the preview what's happening. So if you decrease the roughness, this is going to be more glossy and vice versa. And then also opacity. We have here the possibility to drop down the opacity. We have the IOR. So let's see what's going to happen here. If I do this, you can see it's a little bit transparent. And then we have picture, if we want to add a picture, but again, we're going to work with textures and pictures later. Then plaster again, and then we have plastic. And also this one has reflectivity, clarity, transparency, if you want like a transparent plastic. And there you go. So we have other results. So right now I'm working with the material, but also with the layer. So anything that has that layer is going to change. So this is why it's more useful to work with materials into the layers rather than going object by object. So when you need to manage a large scene with a lot of objects, you just change the main layer. So here, for example, I have these like big buildings, okay, which I put in a layer called massing. And so I don't need to select all of them every time. I just need to go into the layer where I put them. So again, right click and change object layer. And now all I need to do is change the material here. And that's gonna affect all those shapes. So, and I can give them a more glossy or less glossy look, more metallic, more plastic look, etc., etc. And you can also see that materials work in sub-Ds, meshes, and standard NURBS, solid of Rhino. You can find all the different possibility here. If I show you here in the properties, this is a mesh, and this is a sub-D, and this is a solid poly surface. So it works with everything. So that's really wonderful. And well, this is glass material we already talked about. So the one I actually prefer, so let me select this. And also, if you select an object where you applied a material through the layer, well, of course, you can change it. Instead of using the layer material, you can just override with anything in here. So again, let's go plus. And well, the one that I like is the custom. Custom lets you customize basically anything. So you have the color. Let's make it like brown or dark gray. And then you have the glossy finish. And you can also see it like real time. So I prefer in this panel because everything I change, I don't need to go and say, okay, and confirm. I can see the changes real time. So transparency, reflectivity, again, more glossy, less glossy. And we can also use colors and textures here to define these values. But again, we're going to talk about textures later. This is all slots when you can use textures. And here we have reflection polish, transparency, clarity, of course, if you're using transparency, etc., etc. And also here you have emission and self-illumination, Fresnel reflectivity. So you have basically any effect that you can apply in Rhino. We are not talking about ENSCAPE materials yet. We are just talking about what you can do in Rhino with layers and materials. And again, that's really important. It's important because now you can manage all the objects in the scene. Once you find the correct material, you can apply directly to the layer, and that's going to help you manage everything that you have in the scene in Rhino. And this will be all for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, subscribe to the channel to stay updated for more videos on this landscape for Rhino. And also, if you join the channel, you can support us. You can thank us. You can support us to create more videos like this. And check our other video courses and video guides. So thanks for watching and see you in the next.